That seems fair to me.
Fairness isn't the
really
issue.
think
If
you're
anything,
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make a judgment on what fair is.
Unacceptable by any reasonable standard. You can't.
Donnybrook is made possible through the generous support of the members of KETC.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook, brought to you thanks to our friends at the Gatesworth, who do that week in and week out. Let's meet those assembled tonight, starting with the media veteran herself, Wendy Wiese, and the award-winning Bill McClellan from the Post-Dispatch. He's Ray Hartmann from St. Louis Magazine and STLMag.com. And from the St. Louis American and STLMag.com, Alvin, Reid, and congratulations to you, Bill McClellan, for taking home the 2017 Newspaper Guild Terry Hughes Award. You got that this past week. Congratulations.
Well, I used to sit next to Terry Hughes, so that means a lot. She was really not only a great writer, but a terrific person.
Well, she sure
She
was.
was a lot of fun.
And so are you. And
well, you're very kind, Tyler.
Hey, let's, we say that before we start arguing. That's the end of the niceties on this program. Alvin, Reid, I want to ask you, no niceties between the Major Daily, the Post-Dispatch, and Steve Stenger, the county executive. Where do we begin? They're accusing him of having too cozy a relationship with John Rallo, who got a contract to promote the region with Montel Williams. That's one issue. Another is the Northwest Plaza development, where a lot of St. Louis County offices are now located. And it was developed by some brothers who gave more than $300,000 to the Stenger campaign. But now the St. Louis Post-Dispatch says, hey, no one did the due diligence, seeing if maybe the previous offices for the county should have been renovated, or if they should have rented somewhere else, or even built new. It looks like Northwest Plaza might be more expensive than people thought. What do you think?
Well, interesting you bring up the Post-Dispatch and what's going on now, because, you know, they caught the race train that drove Charlie Dooley out of office and were very proud to support Steve Stenger. Now, you know, buyer's remorse. On the Northwest Plaza deal, from the time it came up and they were moving, there were people that said, like, why are you moving it? How much is it going to cost? Oh, and by the way, you get sizable amount of monies from this group of developers, and that amount of money has continued to increase. Now, this deal that we were all in, it's getting even worse for the county, it seems like, every month, because we're still paying rent on a property that's not used, and it's going to cost more to be there at Northwest Plaza. It's been a bad deal all the way around. Oh, and by the way, once again, the deal was done for some people, non-bid, that, you know, have donated a lot to your campaign. It doesn't matter if it's Steve Stenger, Democrat, Republican. This is the kind of thing that fractures people's confidence in politics and politicians, and there's no excuse for it.
Well, you know, I agree with most of what you say, Alvin. Jeremy Kohler, who's the reporter who did the story, really detailed it all well, and it's hard for I think for the county executive to argue against Kohler's reporting.
I disagree. I like Jeremy Kohler. I got a tour. Full disclosure, got a tour from Bob Garner at the facility. I think it's spectacular. I actually think, I don't know anything about the process. According to Mr. Garner, he was actively involved during the Dooley administration as one of the finalists to do something along these lines. You got to remember what, and to Charlie Dooley's credit, by the way, because so much of the county space was scattered all over the place in little rundown strip centers. A lot of it was with mold and terrible conditions. And to Dooley's credit, he was looking at doing something about that. I will tell you, from having a miserably bad experience in commercial real estate, learning the hard way, for what the county is paying at $12 a square foot, despite what Mr. Kohler said, it is a steal. It is spectacular.
Well, Ray,
space.
they could have had even a bigger steal then, because Jeremy wrote about how nearby you could get property for under that.
What I don't think what I would disagree with Mr. Kohler about, who I think is a great reporter, is all space is not created equal. I saw the space, and this quality space, they could have paid double for this in Clayton.
But no,
I mean,
wait,
it's-
wait.
Is it a coincidence that they gave a lot of money to Stinger?
I didn't say that. I said I got I have no idea how they got it. I don't know the process. But I do know it started in the Dooley administration, and they acted like Stanger came in and just brought in the Garners, and I don't think it's
But
fair.
you said it's.
I don't
I'm
think it's
sorry.
fair.
You said it's
Right.
spectacular.
It
and
is
I
very
don't-
good space.
Okay, but I mean, I don't want county workers. I don't want county employees to be working near black mold. But there are a lot of employees that would love to be working in spectacular conditions.
No, I'm saying that they are not paying. They're paying
They're
12
not
bucks
paying
a square.
spectacular
That is
dollars.
not a lot of money for office space. And
Well,
I'm
it
telling you.
depends on where the office space
But
is,
what I'm trying to
Ray.
tell you is
I mean, you
compare
can't
it-
compare Northwest
Yes.
Plaza to like
But-
Clayton or downtown St. Louis.
No, but you also can't compare Class A space to Class B, and most of the space in that area is not that kind
But
of quality
as
space.
as
It's an
far-
unfair comparison, and I think all you got to do, and one of the things in the Post story is they talk about how happy the employees are. It is very nice space, and by the way, the whole no wait, a
and I
minute, the
want
whole
them to be
what they've
happy.
done. People ought to go see what they've done with Northwest
All right.
Plaza.
Well, I
And there's
will
a lot
say-
of big
But
companies
I will
out
say-
there.
as far
It's
as
not just the
Montel
county.
Williams, that smacks of a tone deafness, the likes of which we haven't seen that kind of tone deafness for a while, in my opinion.
Well-
and this was a $20,000 campaign contribution. Mr. Stanger says, I've gotten $3.8 million from a variety of county residents, but $20,000 in my mind. He's risking an awful lot for a $20,000
Well,
campaign.
when-
Are
contribution.
you
what Stanger's
assuming
saying-
that you're making the assumption, and I think that whole deal.
He
didn't
wasn't
make-
the low bid, Ray.
No,
I
no,
mean-
I think that deal didn't make any sense to me from what I've heard.
Except-
about it.
But
but I will say that I don't think at this point the Post-Dispatch, Stanger was on the radio today criticizing Tony Messenger for, according to Stanger, basically helping the Mount Ivani campaign.
Wait a minute.
So
hold
no,
it.
I'm just
Wait a
saying.
minute. Hold
so
on,
they have
Ray.
a lot of bad.
Wait a minute.
blood.
Hold
They have a
on.
bad
Slow
blood.
down.
They
What
got
does
bad
that
blood.
have to do with anything?
Well, no,
now
I mean,
this
I think
shaky
Stanger
deal
thinks
going
he's
down,
getting
and these
bad
people
treatment
getting all this money, and it's kind
just
of like
said that Dooley got bad treatment
But
from the
wait,
Post. That's what
It's-
Stanger
they
thinks
did
he's getting.
absolutely.
Okay.
But also, two things. One, don't pin this off on Charlie Dooley. Charlie Dooley didn't say move the election commission out to North
I
County.
think it's a good thing. I'm not
pay-
pinning
but
anything
wait,
on
no,
it.
you're saying that this somehow started in the Dooley administration.
did.
It did not. So this whole deal at Northwest
And,
Plaza.
and it's kind of a cop-out to say you don't know the process by which it happened.
I don't. How do we know?
But you know that,
I know
these
what the
people gave a
result.
lot of money to Steve
Okay,
Stanger.
well,
I know the
for the sake of
result
time,
is a
guys,
good
we got
space
to
for St.
we
Louis
got to
County.
move
That's all
on for
I'm
the sake
saying.
of time. But I did talk to Stanger this week, and I told him I think it would be better if people who have the county executive position did not take money for their campaigns for people who have contracts with the county, just
you're
for the
absolutely
sake
right.
of
Amen.
appearance. I mean,
I think you're right.
And speaking of that Northwest Plaza, everyone should go see the new Spirit Church that Aeneas Williams has in the old Toys R Us. It's pretty impressive, I will say. Okay, let's move on to some more topics. Starting, I think, with you, Bill. You're from the land of Lincoln, Illinois, and it's never boring when it comes to politics in your home state. And this time, J.B. Pritzker, who's the Democratic candidate for governor, was caught on tape talking to Rod Blagojevich. That's fraught with peril, of course. That's the incarcerated former governor. But in this conversation, he was talking about some African Americans who would be appointed to government positions, and he described one as the least offensive of the bunch. I thought those were horrible words. Do you think they're fatal for J.B. Pritzker?
No, and of course, then again, I didn't think Blagojevich belonged in prison for trying to get something for a Senate seat. That's just the way Illinois politics is. And I thought that what Pritzker was talking about was appointing an African American to the position, and you got to deal with the downstate Democrats who are much like the outstate Republicans in Missouri, and saying that this candidate would be the least offensive. I'm a old white guy, but I didn't find that offensive. Alvin, I
didn't find that offensive at all. I think the ads are kind of effective because you're having these conversations with a guy that's in prison for basically corruption. Now, I'm with you. I don't think he really did anything all that wrong, but at the same time, you're having some pretty in-depth and personal conversations with a man that broke the law. That being said, these are Republican commercials, and the overwhelming majority of black people are going to vote for the Republican candidate anyway. So I don't think this keeps Pritzker from getting the nomination. And if he gets the nomination, then he'll still win the majority of the African American vote. So I don't. Who's that? That part. They're running a series of them, and that one that's running, I don't think it has a very big impact on Democrats.
Were you picking up on the perceived racial overtones? Because he said something about the controversial nature of Reverend Jeremiah Wright, President Obama's pastor. Everybody thought he was controversial. Even Democrats thought he was controversial. Were there racist overtones there?
No, because if you had a conversation about, all right, there's 3 people from St. Louis, okay?
Right.
And I don't mean to insult anybody anywhere, but I'm a choice.
Peter Rabbit.
Peter Rabbit and Zaki Baruti are your 3 choices, okay? Somebody might say, like, that isn't going to fly with a lot of people. Zaki,
Right.
bless his heart, does great work. But that won't fly in some appointments. If somebody used that, not language, that sounds worse than it, that vernacular to describe me and why this might go over, then I'm not insulted by that.
Well, one of them was Jesse Jackson Jr. and not Zaki Baruti. So, but
Well, Jesse Jackson Jr. has the same ring to
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
Illinois as
Okay.
I think when you're talking about recounting somebody's private conversation, which this was, you got to have context. And in this case, this wasn't some racial outburst by the guy. He was analyzing.
Well, he apologized for it.
Well, no, of course he's going to apologize for it.
everybody has to
you have
apologize
to.
for
Everybody's got to
everything
walk
today.
the plank, of course. But the point is, it was an analytical discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's continue with Bill then. Let's talk about medical marijuana. There is a proposal in Jefferson City to legalize marijuana for medical purposes. However, Bill, it'll only be for terminal illnesses. Do you think that this bill, which really is not what the lovers of pot want, should be passed anyway, even though it's a bad bill?
And you're asking me to speak for all lovers of pot?
Pretty much.
I think I can.
Pretty
I think
much.
I can do that, Charlie.
I think so.
And I would say any bill legalizing or decriminalizing pot, in any sense, is a good bill. I think that if Missouri wants to get on board with a real medical marijuana bill, this is only a start, but it's a start. So if I was a legislator, I would vote for it, but I would certainly be writing a much stronger, more expansive medical marijuana bill. The one they have in Illinois isn't working very well because they make it too hard to get certified. And you don't want to make it difficult for people.
Because you've looked into the situation in Illinois.
And
Indiana.
I have friends,
and
I
Ohio.
consider
You have
myself
friends.
grandfathered into Illinois, Wendy.
I know.
I would never speak for lovers of pot, but Bill is our leader. I wish we could. I think there is substantial support in Missouri for medical marijuana, period. I don't think at this point, and we've all talked about, obviously I'm in favor of legalizing it, period, because I think it should be. But forget about what I think, and I think the recreational use of marijuana would fail at this point in Missouri, but that medicinal marijuana would pass easily. But I'm worried, based on what we've seen in this reporting, in terms of some of the and I'm not talking about even in St. Louis, but statewide, if this starts having a lot of, political
Attachments.
implications and other things like that, it really is disturbing because it's something that would pass in its simple form.
All right, once again, okay. Years ago, Illinois decided, hey, we're going to have lottery. All right? It was one of the few states in the Midwest, pretty much the only one had lottery, and they just reaped off that for years before everybody caught up with them, okay? After that, and this is being discussed in Jefferson City right now, because years ago, Illinois said, like, in bars and whatnot, you can have these slot machines and poker machines, and they're raking in money. Now, here comes Missouri, dragging again, way behind, talking about, hey, we can make, like, what was the estimate? 20 million, something like that off these things. And Illinois makes more money off those than they do off the, like, parimutuel betting on
And they're
horses.
still
and
broke, Alvin.
Right. But wait, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they'd be broker if they didn't have it, and Missouri is broke. So thus, if Missouri's going to do something, you need to get on it right now. Let's quit being last.
You may be right. What I don't like about the bill is that they're limiting the purveyors to 1 per 100,000 in each county. So there'd be 10 in St. Louis County, and that means the friends of the politicians will get the contracts and there won't be much competition. And
But a bill like this doesn't need to have that detail. I mean, you could even leave that up to the, as much as we don't love the legislature, it seems to me that every time we have an initiative, there's so many different little, issues, side issues that derail it, and a clean up or down vote on medicinal marijuana would pass very strongly.
let me ask you, Ray, about an incident that happened in downtown St. Louis. There were a couple of brothers who were downtown early in the morning, I think about 2 in the morning, 2 African-American fellas, and they had an altercation with a white guy, and they end up running, going to the police, and the police charged them with a crime for basically attacking and robbing the white guy. Well, nobody checked the surveillance tape, and then maybe 6 to 8 months later, after the brother's mother just pleaded and pleaded for someone to please look at the surveillance tapes, they discovered actually the black guys were robbed by the white guy. And now everyone's saying, wow, that's really interesting. Why didn't they look at the surveillance tape in the first place? It would have been an easy thing to do. What are the lessons we're learning from this case?
That the people who are speaking out over and over and over in the African American community have been vindicated. This is a microcosm of what African Americans say over and over. I think one of the things that jumped out at me in this story is these victims, and we don't call them that because they're African American, the victims in the story had gone to police who didn't want to hear their story. And so when you hear this, and people say we're tired of hearing about Black Lives Matter, we're tired of this, this story is a microcosm of what they complained about, right down to the fact that at the end, the prosecutors go to them after this horrendous story, and thank goodness for the mother, what a hero she was, obviously fighting for her kids. At the end of the story, they said, do you want to prosecute him? Are you kidding me? After these guys have been put through this, it's horrible.
Okay, let's go back and look at what happened. The victims were not charged with the crime. The one was taken to the hospital, and the other was taken to jail and then released. The white guy was also arrested and then released. You know, the cops clearly didn't know what was going on. You had a shooting. You had a white guy standing there, and he said, 2 black guys tried to rob me. And on Washington Avenue, about a block away, there were 2 black guys running, and one threw a gun in a flower pot. Well, of course the police are going to be suspicious of that, and they bring everybody in, and the thing was so kinky that nobody was charged with it. And, you know, unfortunately, they have looked at the videotape and they have vindicated the victims. And I agree with you that the prosecutor's office, it's ridiculous to tell the 2 victims, do you want to prosecute? I mean, besides it's not their choice, this is a crime against the state. But I thought the system worked pretty well. I mean, it didn't work quickly enough for these kids, but they weren't sitting in jail. They weren't charged with anything.
Were the cops not aware that there were surveillance cameras, or did they not bother to ask about it?
Well, Ray, you know, right now we have murders every day and shootings every day in the city, and here was an attempted robbery. Who knows who did it? You can't blame the cops for initially thinking that these black guys might have done it when they're running down the street and one throws a gun in the flower pot.
Okay, all right, let's move on. Alvin, I want to ask you about another case. Fellow by the name of Mike Revis won a seat this week in the state legislature in Jefferson County in a district that Trump won, Donald Trump, President of the United States, won overwhelmingly in November of 2016. Now, there were 4 representative seats, legislative seats up for grabs on Tuesday. 3 went to Republicans, but one of them in Jefferson County going Democrat?
Well, you know, when I first moved back, Jefferson County was Democratic. And it's not been all that long since they had Democratic representation. I don't think it's a dance in the aisle moment for Democrats. At the same time, I think when you look at, and it's an oddball case in Alabama, but, you know, the Democrat prevailed. But in other elections, Virginia and throughout the state, there are a lot of state offices are flipping. Whether it's a wave, whether it's true momentum, I don't know, but I think it does prove that there are some people that voted one way a couple of Novembers ago that might be voting different come this November. But it's a lot of time between now and then. You know, if I'm a national Democrat, it's good news. At the same time, I I wouldn't quite.
This was a special election, as you said. 3 other Republicans did win. I think Stephen Weber is right. I think you've got a lot of complacency on the part of Republicans who are thinking everything's going swimmingly and probably really not paying attention to some of these races. And you've got Democrats who are really energized and getting
Well, I mean,
on the
that's,
vote.
how, that's how a president got elected.
Yeah,
and I mean,
there's no
yeah,
question.
look, and kudos to him for doing it. But the same parameters in that, hey, all right, you better be serious about it.
Keep in mind, and obviously you can't predict what's going to happen 9 months in this kind of political environment. But I think the significant, and of course Missouri was at least in the silos that were willing to report it, Missouri's, the case outside of the district outside of St. Louis was a national news story. And what's significant is if you look at the 4 races, the average was something like, I want to say 20 or 25 points swing. Even when the Republicans won, they were winning by like 20 points less than they were winning last time. So I think it's, with Trump and Greitens, the Republicans have a real, I think that it's one of the reasons I'm optimistic for Claire McCaskill.
Maybe so.
I think it's a very going to be a tough year.
Well,
for
also,
Republicans.
the Republican in this race was Right to Work, and Jefferson County does have quite a few union people, doesn't it, Wendy?
Absolutely they do.
Let me ask you about Kit Bond, Wendy. He was quoted by USA Today as saying that the Republican candidate for Senate who's going to take on Senator McCaskill in November, Josh Hawley, better get it in gear. Those are the words of Christopher Kit Bond. What'd you make of that?
I was I was surprised because it would sort of send the message that they're pushing the panic button already and they're not getting the kind of results that they want. Although Josh Hawley's campaign manager was quick to point out that apparently he's done quite well when compared to other money, fundraisers around the country. What's really fascinating is that this indicates that there's some sort of a split between the old guard, John Danforth, who was obviously very pro-Hawley, very enthusiastic about Josh Hawley, and Kit Bond, who I think is holding out hope that maybe Ann Wagner will, bring her little spurs back into state politics.
Just in reading the story, the one thing that I found, that Danforth, who I greatly respect, but then would use the old, like, I'm not trying to bring up conspiracy theories, but, and then lay this thing on Claire McCaskill and said, like, you seem to be, ignoring some of, your candidate's obvious faux pas so far earlier in the race. And I think they're kind of alarmed, like, based on where everything was just a scant, 14, 15 months ago, the fact that he's just not steamrolling Claire McCaskill seems to be alarming people.
Well, Jack Danforth lost all credibility for all time to come with the whole Tom Schweik thing, as far as I'm concerned, with regards to internal Republican politics and his horrendous attack on John Hancock and all the other stuff. Having said that, Kit Bond, on the other hand, I'm biased because he's my old boss, is probably second to none in terms of his understanding and grasp of Missouri Republican politics. And for Kit to be out there saying this really indicates, whether it's anything between him and Danforth, I don't know, but it certainly indicates trouble within the Republicans. Josh Hawley structurally should by now be somebody as Attorney General that they've gotten behind, and he's not.
Right, but you've got the power of the incumbency, which you cannot ever underestimate.
Especially in Senate.
Right. And the fact that when we miscast, it reminds me a lot, because he looks the part, and I think tragically, he's got the bona fides. He, went to Yale, Ivy League, and so people think, oh yeah, he's, young, handsome family man. It's like Dan Quayle. We can't miscast people and then push the panic button this early.
I'm so surprised that they pushed Ann Wagner out. I mean, I thought that she was going to be a terrific candidate against Claire McCaskill and 2 strong women. And was looking forward to it, and all of a sudden to push Josh Hawley in.
A young man,
But keep in
and
mind,
that doesn't sit well either right now. That's kind of tone deaf all by itself.
I think that having statewide experience, which Josh Hawley has and Ann Wagner didn't in terms of as a candidate, is significant. But I think that this is structurally a year, because it's the off year, that it would favor Democrats, not as a partisan argument, but just because it will.
Yeah.
And I think Claire McCaskill is positioned to do very well.
Ray, I want to stick with you as we talk about Alex Garcia. It's really an unusual case, the likes of which we haven't seen around here at all, as far as I know. Alex Garcia is from Honduras, and he tried to get into the United States in 2009. He was rebuffed. He came in illegally in 2010. By all accounts, he's keeping his nose clean. He's got 5 kids, living in Poplar Bluff with a lovely wife. But he was told 2 years ago to get out, and then he was given another warning a year ago, and now his warnings are up. He's supposed to be deported, but the Maplewood Church is keeping him, harboring him there. Should he be able to stay there or be free or pay a penalty or what?
First, let's give an award to the Maplewood Church for being good, for good citizenship. And maybe there's more to the story. I don't see any compelling reason that if this is somebody that's here, I understand that it may not be, that there are genuine concerns about immigration policy, and it would be nice to have comprehensive immigration reform. I don't see any reason, compelling reason why we're going to be a better community or better state or city if this person's deported. I just don't see the benefit of it.
Were you supposed to have committed a crime to be on this fast track to deportation? It seems like that was part of the deal. There's a similar case going on in Lawrence, Kansas right now, though he's escaped being deported, but he's got like a bunch of kids and been here for 29 years. And if you tell me, you know, that you're here illegally and you have to go and they kick the door in the church, I would hate that because they shouldn't violate the church. But I mean, law's the law. But that being said, how about address maybe the law before we start addressing individual cases of people holed up at church?
About
I
15
think it's
seconds.
a whole lot more complicated than the fact that he's here illegally and the fact he has a family, compounds. I'm with Ray. I wouldn't throw him out.
Well, we'll see what the viewers have to say during your turn, which is just around the corner, folks. But first, let's see what people had to say about last week's program. Richard Eigenreuther wrote, "I'm fine with Mike Parson, the lieutenant governor, having a driver. Give him an intern." Richard lives in St. Louis. We also heard from Bruce Korbsmeyer of Oakville, who wrote, "Wendy's support of a driver for the lieutenant governor is missing an important consideration. Is this really the best use of taxpayers' $55,000? And we heard from Mona Priest of Crestwood, who wrote, "I love this show. I have learned about things going on in my town." You can share your compliments or criticisms at KETC, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails, letters at ketc.org, and those tweets, hashtag Donnybrook STL, which we're going to read in a matter of moments. Who's we? Wendy and I will be right back. Everybody else, we'll see you next week at this time. Thank you so much. Don't go away.
Donnybrook is made possible through the generous support of the members of KETC.